watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the show where you can have your property related questions answered by a team of property experts. And joining me today is a wonderful looking Sally Wang. Sally, hello.
Hello, nice to be here again.
Hope you had a good trip in.
Yeah.
Sally is founder and director of SJW UK Property Investments Limited. And joining Sally is Daniel Jackson for the first time on Property Question Time. So don't be too nervous, we'll try and be kind. Okay,
Thanks,
and Daniel is a sales director of Sequre Property Investments. Okay, welcome to you. And I think buy-to-let investments are your particular speciality.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right, well, Sally, I'm going to start off with you. And your first question is this. I'm considering purchasing a site towards the east of London with a view to developing a block of around 30 apartments. I'm only a small developer, so the marketing success would be critical for me. I know that traditionally the Far East, i.e. Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, China and Hong Kong, have provided many purchases for London new build property. Since COVID and the recent worldwide financial difficulties, has this market disappeared and should I be looking elsewhere for sales, or will that conventional area carry on as being a good producer?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Stephen. I think I'm the best person to answer that question because
you are indeed.
because all my clients are from Asia. So if my business is still here and thriving, I think this developer could have, made it off with the Chinese buyers or
but only, of course,
Asian
if
buyers.
they use you as the agent.
Oh, definitely,
right,
yeah.
Okay.
And I think this developer is correct. Marketing now is very crucial. Because of the COVID, I don't think the Chinese buyers or Asian buyers, they exit from the market. But we did see a very interesting shift in the dimension of the buyers. For example, I'll give you an example, Stephen. Before the COVID, all our buyers, 90% of them, I think, coming from the mainland China, because I'm from mainland China, that's where my strengths are. And then during the COVID period of time, I started to see a lot of our company started to have a lot of Hong Kong buyers because of the BNO. We see a lot of Singapore buyers because especially recently the Singapore tax has gone up. We also see a lot of Canadian Chinese buyers, Luxembourg Chinese buyers, Germany Chinese buyers, American, Australia, New Zealand. We see international Chinese buyers who come to UK and buy properties. This is, to me, is a big surprise as well. So I don't think you should ignore that market, 100% not. But to get their attention, you really need to, how do I say that? Make sure your marketing is in line with the change, the COVID, and all the difficulties the world is facing. You need to make sure marketing is up to date. And for us, we dramatically transformed our in-house marketing as well. We transformed from the words, like previously it's all words, like when you have a development, you have brochure, fact sheets, price list, and you have all this. But now we change into the content, we change into video, short videos, good for TikTok, Chinese Red Little Book, all these little short videos. We also have a long videos to kind of introduce what the surrounding areas are and what the successful stories are. So the content of the marketing need to be transformed. And also the platforms that you put your push out your marketing content needs to be transformed as well. If you get that right, I actually think you get more Chinese buyers than before COVID time and easier and with a lower budget because we have done it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you use TikTok?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. I've always thought in the past, I've been a bit concerned about using TikTok for property marketing because I don't know how seriously it was taken, but I see and understand now that the more you look at any one particular type of content, then the more of that content you'll get going to your feed, won't you? So actually that counters out any sort of nonsense stuff that you might get. So it's certainly taken over, and I think certainly on the Asia Pacific continents, then that's very effective, isn't it?
TikTok has we have so many social media platforms. TikTok is only one of 100, I would say. TikTok, you have a Chinese version of TikTok, you have non-Chinese version of TikTok. They are very different. So if you publish things on these two different TikTok platforms, you think you're pushing to the same audience, actually you're not. So, and also on like this Chinese TikTok, English, non-Chinese TikTok, they have a different logic behind all the social media platform. And how do I explain that? It's kind of like you have the intelligence, computer intelligence for that platform. And one of the sign that shows is, for example, you watch something, and then it will pick up what you watch, pick up your habit, and keep pushing you similar contents. But then if you are the publisher who publish the content, then you probably can use that as well to push to the people you want to push. It's kind of like a law of attraction being used on the social media platform. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Solly. Daniel, your first question on question time. I understand that interest rates are on the up and are likely to be so for the foreseeable future. Do the panel think that when trying to secure funding, I should be better off trying to secure normal mortgage funding or try specific buy-to-let mortgage products? Perhaps the panel will be kind enough to enlighten me as to the pros and cons of both.
I think what the question's alluding to is do we look at sort of traditional buy-to-let funding in personal name or maybe a limited company? I think because interest rates are certainly looking like they're going to be increasing for the foreseeable future, it would be advisable to sort of maybe lock in for say 3 or 5 years on a fixed rate now to sort of mitigate any rises going forward. And I think certainly for most of the clients I deal with, you know, they're buying in limited companies. So that's not necessarily your traditional high street buy-to-let route. Rates can be a little bit higher, but of course you're able to offset the tax via your limited company. Of course, you're only paying corporation tax at the end of the day. So yes, might be a little bit more expensive, but the sort of limited company route seems to be a far more sort of in-depth route, maybe the wrong word to use, but more commonly used now. And that would certainly be the way forward to mitigate any increases.
Well, I think two things there. I think obviously the government are trying to push people down that route, aren't they? Because limited company taxation is easier to control and to collect, I suppose. And also, I suppose, from a personal point of view, if your investments are in a limited company and that's the sort of longer term process for your portfolio, then of course it does become easier to use that income as perhaps a pension support or whatever else, depending on what your exit strategy is.
Yes, and everybody's different in terms of what they're looking to get from their property investments going forward. And I think certainly, you know, the majority of clients I speak to are in buy-to-let for the long term, and they're planning for their futures, you know, whether that be their pension. You know, there's very sort of limited number of people now buying in their own name, primarily because of the tax changes. But yes, certainly the limited company route is definitely the one to go for, I would say.
Sally, your overseas customers buying here, do you find they're wanting to buy in a company name or private individual name?
Very similar to Daniel as well. So if they just buy, let's say, just 1 or 2 properties, then the individual names would probably be easier because the cost of getting mortgage is higher and it's more difficult. And since they are non-residents here, so they can't really access to the high street good rate. If they are buying, let's say, 6 units in one development, they have to look at. We'd advise them to look at, you know, use company structure, although it's kind of difficult for them as well. But then, you know, tax efficiency in the short run, in the long run, it makes sense. And if they're looking a long-term investment, for example, they plan to live in the UK for the next 10, 15 years, they although only just buy 1 or 2 this year, but then in 3 years' time, they want to buy 3 or 4, they keep buying, then set up a company makes more sense, more tax efficient. Yeah. Okay.
And just for the last minute or so of this half of the show, I'll just ask you both, do you think the buy-to-let market is being reduced and shrunk by the government's I'm going to say interference into the property market? And by that I mean, you know, the taxation changes, the the leaning towards pushing landlords around to sort of what they call ideal tenancies and that sort of thing. Do you think it's having a detrimental effect on the market?
I think it's had a certain impact. Yeah, I don't think it's been. I don't think it's had a detrimental impact as of yet. The numbers of people buying buy-to-let properties has been increasing year on year, even since the tax changes came in, the increase in stamp duty, because I think people see the long-term benefits of bricks and mortar. So at the moment, I wouldn't say there's been a particular decline in any way, shape or form. How that pans out over the next 5-10 years, we'll wait and see.
I agree with Daniel, but something that I want to add up from my Chinese market is, in my clients' portfolio, a part of them, they are, how do you call that? Maybe you call it accidental landlords. And the other part of it, they are serious investors. These are the buyers, and they immigrated into the UK. They had a very successful business in China before. They're probably in their mid-50s, and then they are thinking of moving a very large chunk of their assets, and move here because now their children are here. They want to live the rest of their life here or in Europe. So they have to buy serious buy-to-let investment because otherwise there's no other investment products for them to look at. A, they don't speak English. B, they try to, I have clients like that, quite a few. They try to invest with, restaurants, they are different business ventures, and nothing worked out because they don't understand the culture thoroughly. They don't know how to communicate with the British people, as a local person. So this will be the safest way, although they have to pay a lot of tax, but it's better than nothing. This brings them a stable income. One of my clients said it's kind of like he built up a solid castle around him with brick and mortar, and then he can pass on to his daughter. And the other group of people, they are accidental landlords because their children are studying here. And the rent in London is really, really expensive. And for Chinese people, we don't like to pay for somebody else's mortgage.
Sure.
That's just a Chinese culture, and it's a Chinese saying as well. So if the kids are studying here or working here, the parents will buy a property for them. And then the kids probably use it for a couple of years, and they move on to other position, and then the property will be rented out. So this is kind of our Chinese way of accidental landlord. So, the impact currently is not so dramatic, but after 5 to 10 years, we don't know. We should say, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Solly. So there we are, viewers. Property is always best. Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after break when we'll be asking Sally and Daniel more of your questions.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello, welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and joining me are Daniel Jackson and Sally Wang. So welcome back, guys. Sally, your second question. As a buy-to-let investment strategy, do the experts think it's better to go for the lower capital costs and higher gross yields towards the north of England, or go for the safer market demands but lower returns and higher purchase costs found in the London and South East? Well, I think that's a good question for you both, actually, isn't it? So you go first, Sally.
Sally, after you.
Yeah, because my area is mainly in London, right?
Yes.
In the Southeast. Okay. So to answer this question, I actually had to think when you were reading out the question. Buy-to-let investors, from my past 10 years experience, I realize they have different needs. It's not as simple as buy a property, let it out. Traditionally, we think they want rental yield. We think they want a capital growth. Actually, it's more sophisticated than that, because we need to look at the buyers, how long they are thinking of holding on to this buy-to-let portfolio. And also, do they have other expectations? For example, do they need to get a mortgage, or it's a cash buyer, or do they need their children to use it at some point? Do they need to pass on this portfolio to their kids in the future? So these are the different variables that we need to take into consideration. To give you an example, yes, to invest in North London with high yield, but what if the buyer needs the property to complete ASAP, and they want to see the return straight away, maybe next year? Will the project in North London, in North UK, they complete in a year? Will the projects be delayed? If it's been delayed for over 2-3 years, they could have used this money to buy something else in London or buy some other products and get a return already. They are losing opportunity. It's opportunity cost and time cost for them. This is one thing, because I noticed in some of the North UK projects, there's no long stop date. So they're not even protected when that happened. So would they rather to get a security to know that I definitely will get some return next year, or at this point of time is good for my plan, or I wait and have this risk for not being able to complete at that time and lose out my money, So this may be one aspect. The other thing is, some of the investors, they want to get a mortgage. Okay, for international buyers, the Chinese buyers, is not the high street banks, they're not all of them are open up to them. Give you an example, HSBC, they wouldn't go outside of London. They wouldn't even go outside the London Zone 1 or Zone 2. So if they want to get a mortgage, they don't want to put all the cash on that project. Will they be able to meet that criteria in north of the UK? So that's a question for them to consider as well.
There's no opportunity for leverage, is there?
Yeah.
If you go.
Yeah. And also in the future, if the kids are going to study in London or work in London, if they buy a property in north of the UK, will they be able to use that property? So these are all the different aspects that they need to consider. And so the answer is not just a simple to buy high yield or low yield, or and also if they buy in London, although the yield in the next 5 years may be only 3 with new build, roughly the growth is between 3.7% to 5%. This is what I find in London. But then if they buy right, they probably could looking at a capital growth of 20% and 15% in a year. To give you some, I'm not going to mention the name of the project, but last year I saw a development of a plan, new build development in East London near the Crossrail station. So last year I sold a 2-bedroom with lake view on the 7th floor. I sold it at £420,000 last year. Completed this year. We rent out straight away within 24 hours. We get yield of 5.1%. And this year, when the developer launched another block in the same development, facing the motorway, not even the lake, the 2-bedroom are starting from 500,000. So I mean, even in London market, you still can find products with quite good return, yield-wise or capital growth-wise. You just have to dig and do the research. I mean, you're not buying 100 properties. You just probably at that point just buy 1 or 2 or 5 properties. You just got to do your research. Yeah.
But I think the other point to take from what you've said is that it's very important to both think about not just getting into the property, think about your exit strategy and your overall strategy.
Yes.
It's so important, isn't
so
it?
Important, yeah.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Daniel?
Yeah, I think Sally's obviously covered quite a bit of it there, but I would say it's very much client dependent. Whether you go chasing the high yield or whether you're looking for the capital appreciation, and that will then dictate what part of the UK you invest in. There's no argument in terms of the high yields being achieved higher, north of Watford. We deal with a lot of pre-built tenanted stock, so buyers are able to come in and see exactly what yield they're generating straight away. But yeah, like I say, it's very much down to the individual and what requirements they have. So sort of alluding to what Sally said previously. What I would add to that is places like Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Nottingham, the other major cities outside of London have seen really fantastic growth over the last couple of years, double digits for most of those cities, as well as being able to achieve yields of certainly Manchester in excess of 6-7%, Nottingham, Liverpool, Leeds, in excess of 8% in some cases, yet still being able to achieve the capital appreciation. So it's certainly achievable, but a lot of due diligence and a lot of homework needs to go into that as well. Strange.
I always thought you fell off the end of the world when you went past the M25.
Watford Gap now.
Yeah, all right. Okay. All right, Daniel, your final question in this programme. With the various government restrictions regarding rent increases, repossessions of a landlord's property, tax legislation, lease directives, will it all lead to a reduction in the amount of people wanting to invest in buy-to-let? In addition, do the experts think that to compound this problem, which will aggravate the shortage of rental stock, the lessening of availability of funding for these purchases will be a natural result?
I mean, the first point, you know, we're obviously in a situation of extremely high inflation and the highest it's been for 40 years. So people with money sat in the bank, the value of that is decreasing every day and every week and every month. By putting it into a buy-to-let property or bricks and mortar and getting a return, I still think is by far a more efficient way of seeing an investment grow over the long term. You know, bricks and mortar traditionally over the last, you know, however many decades we want to look back has been, you know, pretty safe for people. The stock market is pretty volatile. So even with the things that you've mentioned there, I don't see, you know, maybe the odd occasional landlord who I've got 20, 30, 40 grand to invest and isn't quite sure what he wants to do. You know, maybe that kind of person will wait. But I think, you know, Sally mentioned before, professional landlords and you know, serious property investors will look at this as an opportunity at the moment rather than a chance to sit back and do nothing.
Well, I think serious investors also know very well it's never a 5-minute business, is it?
Absolutely.
You know, properties are considered business to go into. And I mean, I do think it is important to differentiate between the two types of landlord. I mean, you referred, Sally, to accidental landlords, which are typically the landlords that perhaps inherit a property or just have one small, you know, go at sort of buy-to-let with one property, and that does require a different ethos. But again, I would say to people who get in at that level, do make sure you understand it's a business. Be prepared to make sometimes very difficult business decisions.
Yes.
And if you're not prepared to do that, don't just think that buying a property is the be all and end all of making money, because it's not.
It's not.
You know, we can all lose out. Okay, Sally, do you? I know you deal mainly internationally, but with your sort of foothold here in the UK market, are you finding a difference with UK buyers here at the moment as well?
Our first line for buyers is Chinese buyers, international buyers. So once they bought the property, we let it out and manage the properties. These are the international tenants. These poor, we don't have that many Chinese. And these tenants, some of them will turn into the buyers. And then once our buyers hold on the property for like 8 to 10 years, they will sell. And when they resell, we're looking at the local markets as well. So we do have the UK buyers. But I find the UK buyers, number one thing they want is they need to be able to, a lot of them need to see the actual product for them to make a solid decision. But for international buyers, I find when we sell off plan, it's easier to communicate with them. So, like for example, now I sell a property that's going to complete in 4 years' time. It's going to be really difficult for me to sell to a UK buyer. For international buyers, it's much easier.
But do you think there's two issues there? One is it takes imagination to transfer what's in a brochure or a plan into what's reality. You've got to have a good imagination to understand what it's going to end up like. And I suppose secondly, that the further east we go, Sally, I don't think you'll mind me saying, the willingness to take a gamble, to take a punt is greater. I mean, I know when I used to sell things in Hong Kong and
No, I think it's not only that. For me, I think the main reason is because of, imagine, Stephen, Daniel, we're going to buy a property in New York. And we don't know, let's say we don't know New York that much. And then for you, the choice...
I know it's expensive.
Yeah, you know it's expensive. You know it's expensive, so you have this expectation. But then, because you don't know New York as a local New Yorker, so the choices for you, location-wise, is not that many. You want to buy somewhere that everybody knows you feel safe. You want to buy from good developers so you know it's safe. So your choice is actually limited. But when you are living as a local person, you go street by street and you keep looking. And then once you be overwhelmed by so many options, it's actually very difficult to make a decision. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons.
Great. Okay. Well, look, thank you both very much indeed for your input to today's show. Great answers from both of you. Thank you both. very much indeed. We're going to look forward to seeing you again on Property Question Time, I'm sure. So that's all we've got time for in today's show. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.